Mohammed. All right, next up we have Beth. I'm trying to remember what I wrote about Beth. Let's see. Oh yes, of course. In fact, I even had a video, but I won't be able to show you. So, in case we had the ability for that. So, if you didn't know, Beth is trying to kind of have a secondary thing on the side where she's trying to get certified as some kind of yoga instructor. And I really hope, depending on how far along she gets, she could teach us about yogic flying. You ever heard of this? You know what this is, Beth?
Air yoga.
Yeah, yogic flying, where these weirdos actually think they're flying, but really what they're doing is they're sitting like Indian style or whatever, and then hopping, and it looks really silly, like they're just kidding around like a bunch of kids would do, but they call it yogic flying. Whatever. So anyway, here to talk to us about the information security business model is Beth.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to try not to kill myself. But balance is something that we find in nature all the time, and I find it amazing. Talking about yoga, this is part of where I'm always seeking to find balance. And you know, it's amazing when we think of the trees giving out oxygen, feeding us, then we breathe out carbon dioxide, giving it back to the trees. And it's really this idea of balance that kind of inspired my talk. That, and I'm a woman that has goals and dreams to be able to do different things in my life, including becoming an information security manager. And I got it stuck in my head that in order to do that, I wanted to bolster that with a certification. So I kind of started digging into what it would be to be an information security manager and do the CISMP, certification. So as I was starting to dig into these goals, one of the concepts that I ran into was about a business model for information security. And at that point, kind of the stars aligned, and I'm like, I had that aha moment. I kind of saw where my work fed into the business and how a lot of the times of why are we doing this is kind of answered when I look at everything in a holistic way. So I wanted to share this model with you. And even though it's simple, to me it was very profound. And maybe in this way you can walk away with understanding where your work fits into the overall grand scheme of things. So first of all, just like in nature, we have elements. And there's different elements that we have with the information security business model. And as I was going through this too, I noticed that this is more than just information security. I think in IT in general, we struggle with understanding holistically. We think of one particular area that we're working on, where again, this shows us a little bit more of a holistic view to be able to communicate to our stakeholders. So the different elements that I want to talk about is first the organization. This is really about who we are as a company, what are the strategies that we use in order to be who we are, and the overall values that are promoted within a particular organization. That's what organization is, key element. The next key element is people. You can't have a business without having people. People are the human collective, and it's reflected also in the values and behaviors and your hiring, and basically it's what type of person can really thrive in this environment. Something I've learned personally in terms of living in retail. There's a certain type of person that I think just really grew. Next, we have this thing called process. Now, process is really the mechanism for getting things done. It's the operations and procedures. And the last element, the one that I think we're most familiar with, particularly in this group, is technology. These are the widgets, the coding, the applications that we work on, the hardware. It's really the meat of just making the back-end elements work. So when we look at these elements, the really interesting portion is how they interact together. So then we have how these interact together are these dynamic connections. So we'll walk through these. First, connecting the organization to people, we have culture. So this is our shared history, the behaviors that support those values. And just like in nature, we see what evolves. This is the culture that combines people and the organization. And sticking with the people element, then we have this thing called emergence, which is the act of becoming known and into view. These are the things where this is another opportunity for improvement here at whatever company. when people notice we need to do something else, and we feed into that process. Next, again, continuing on with people, it's hard to see here, but it says human factors. So this is the train. This is the one that maybe most of us are familiar with. We want to get trained on that particular widget. We want to do training so that people understand what we do. It's about the training to be able to make things happen. Now let's move back up, and we have between the organization and governance process, we have governance. And governance is where we start saying the limits, verification, ensuring that we're doing those things that make it work. Then we have enablement and support. This is a key one that I think a lot of us can relate to. This is where we have standards and guidelines and policies. This is where we have that flexibility to support the business. And also kind of where we make and break to say how easy is it for someone to adopt to that technology. Then finally, we have a very important one. I know Tony works a lot with this, is architecture. This is where we need to connect. What's our design? What's the technology that we have? The roadmaps? What's the widgets we need to have in place in order to support that design, that strategic value that our organization has? That's core to our existence. So it's very important to realize that without all these elements together, that we wouldn't have a successful business model. And to illustrate this, there's a common joke among other security people, and it starts with, do you have a firewall? So the joke goes is that an auditor's coming in and talking to an information security manager and says, do you have a firewall? And the manager says, yes, we have a firewall, very promptly. So then the auditor continues on and goes through and is touring the data center. Okay, well, show me your firewall. And he's like, well, it's over there in the corner. And the auditor looks. He's like, yes, it's over there. It's in the box. Not even plugged in. So this is the case where the model failed. It's actually very interesting because it shows that the company wanted to do the right things, but there was a disconnect. There was a disconnect between the people training into on the technology, the process, going back to the technology, that led to a very negative impact. We're able to say you failed audit. So again, by seeing these different elements and how they interact with each other and the balance, you can see where the shift. If you put too much technology in place and you don't have the process and the people, it fails. If you don't have the people, it fails. If you don't have the process, it fails. If you don't have the sense of direction, it fails. So this is where, to me, this was a very profound sense of balance to understand what my work can do, and it also helps to sell the idea of what you're trying to get done. Because from an engineering mindset, I was always about the technology. Oh, this widget does this widget does that. But without tying it back to the larger organization and tying it into everything, it was always a hard stop. But by taking this into account and balancing it, it's an easier sell for everyone. So, in closure, I hope that you can walk away with understanding a little bit more about the overall balance and how, just like we evolve in nature, we can evolve our business models in order to